Welcome to the Rex Andrews Show. Glad to have you on the program with us today. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. Glad to have you. Now, of course, we always ask you as a first-time listener, please subscribe wherever you're listening to. And then also, we're not ashamed and or bashful. We will beg for ratings. So if you think that we're doing a good job, please get us those 5 stars. It always helps us with placement in the stores. If you're a return listener, we want to thank you. It's pretty fun. We have listeners in 32 countries across 6 continents. And if we could figure out how to market to penguins and help them charge their cell phones, we would probably have listeners in Antarctica also. So the show's growing. We're thankful to everybody who tunes in and listens because there's over 850,000 active podcasts in the marketplace today. So you have a lot of choice for content. All right. Don't forget to subscribe. But most importantly, we are on all the social media platforms, but most importantly, go to the show website because we have profiles of all of our guests. Now, we're going to talk fun stuff today and learn a story about our guests, but we'll only touch the tip of the iceberg. So our profiles out there have links to their businesses, their online assets, and all the things that they're doing. So please stop by the website at rexandrewshow.com. And also, that allows us to take a look at our great sponsors. We have a great new sponsor. It's called My Next Evolution. It's a marketplace for people to find their next evolution in training. So if you want to learn something, personal development, career, those types of stuff, check out mynextevolution.com. All right, so we got all the housekeeping stuff out of the way. We're excited today to have another guest. One of the mantras of my show is just common sense is not extinct. There are people out there that think common sense is on the endangered species list, but the truth of it is common sense is out there. And I always push and talk about, hey, let's do things from a common sense perspective. And I think you'll like today's guest. Now, I am a person who I have too many interests for just one lifetime. But the biggest problem is around every corner, there's another discovery that kind of gets my attention. So today we have one of those discoveries on the show with us. All right. So excited to have our guest this morning. She is an interesting person. She does something that not a whole lot of people do. And so I think you'll find it interesting. She's the founder of Cleanreads, and she'll tell us about that. She's an audio narrator, and so that's part of what she does at Cleanreads. She is an escapee of California, and so she moved to the Intermountain West to get away from some of those crazy things going out there. And then, of course, she will admit to being a cat mom. So we might even talk to her about that. I always hear about cat and mom dogs, so that's kind of fun. So I'd like to welcome to the show Emma Faye. Emma, how are you this morning?
Hi, thank you. I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, if you listen to the podcast, if anybody does, it's all about stories from interesting people doing interesting and unique things. And so we like to go back in time and learn about you and tell your story because success doesn't fall out of the sky. People get to where they are based on hops and influences and experiences. So this is a little bit of a long list, but we'll come back and I'll remind you if we need it to. We'd like to go back to the beginning. Where were you born and where were you raised? Now, those can be very different. I had a guest that was moved 63 times before she was 15. So moving around as a youth can have some contribution to who we are. We like to know what you've done and did as a youth growing up, as far as how you spent your fair time. So sports, drama, theater, computers, shoplifting, and don't laugh at that one. I actually had a guest by age 15 who was a car thief.
Wow.
So those influence us. Do you have peers? Excuse me, not siblings, not peers. Obviously, I have peers. And then any siblings that might have survived your harassment and treatment as growing up. We want to know about your parents and your family life and what that was like. That's always important because sometimes it's very supportive and sometimes it gives us examples of, wow, I don't want to be anything like that. So we'll do that. We'll hopscotch through some education and your experiences and then we'll talk about what you're up to today with your Cleanreads. So
Great.
Emma, where were you born?
I was born in California. My birth story in and of itself is an interesting story. I was actually born 3 months early. at 26 weeks. So I was a
Wow.
miracle. So shouldn't be here. It was 1 pound, 14 ounces. So
Ooh, that
I,
fit in a palm of your hands with
yep.
two hands.
Yep. So that's an interesting story in and of itself. But yeah. So out in California, I was raised in a really small town out in the Mojave Desert,
Okay.
middle of nowhere. It's about 3 hours northeast of Los Angeles. And yeah, a tiny little town. Grew up out there. Not my favorite place. Couldn't wait to get out to the city when I finally graduated. But yeah, that's where I'm from. I have two older sisters, so I was the one that received most of the abuse.
Okay. All right.
But they're great. And yeah, my parents are lovely. My parents divorced when I was 8, and so that definitely has impacted my life in a lot of ways. I attribute my maturity to that in a lot of ways. I grew up fast because there was a lot of things that happened, and had to figure out life in different ways than most 8-year-olds have to do. So, so things happen, and it's all good, and you got to make the best of it. So.
Now, did you spend most of your time with your mother or your father, or what was that like?
Yeah, I lived with my mom. I visited my dad. We had visitation, so I was with him throughout the week here and there. But yeah, I lived with my mom, and one of my sisters and the other sister went with my dad. So not too close, not as close with my oldest sister as I am with the one right above me, just because we didn't live together growing up.
Okay. Now, what did you do as a kid when you had spare time?
I was an actor through and through. We had this really fun patriotic program that they would put on every year, the community would do. And my whole family did it. My dad used to play Uncle Sam in it. My mom would teach some of the dances, and so my sisters were in it. And I couldn't be in it until you were like 6 years old or something. I don't know the age, but I was just dying to be in it. So finally I was able to be in it, and I was hooked. The acting bug bit me super hard. And loved it ever since. And so I did a lot of theater at schools. And then when I was about 12, my mother and my grandmother signed me up for some film acting classes. And that's where I started my film career, was around that age, and started taking classes then.
Did you get into any films then?
Some small things here and there, some independent, some, student films, nothing really anybody knows, but I love it anyway.
I'll diverge for just a brief moment here. Most people don't know this, but, and I haven't shared it on a podcast rant yet, but as a elementary school in 5th grade, the movie, The Black Beauty, I was the original boy that was cast as that as the main role.
Wow.
But my mother decided that she didn't want to ruin my life by being a child actor. So she pulled me from it. And to this day, I'm thankful and regretful. It's like, Mom, I could have been somebody. So anyway, sorry.
That's really cool though.
Yeah, it just came to my mind. And so when things come to my mind, I share them. So anyway, don't have a great filter. Okay, so when you got done with high school, what was your next stop?
That was to Los Angeles. I went to film school so I could learn behind the scenes, since I'd been acting at that point for years. Loved it. Had a wonderful time there. But what's a little more interesting about me is I have really high standards. And there's a lot of projects that I'm not willing to work on. I won't do like rated R projects. There's a lot of words and a lot of scenes that I am just not interested in doing. And so it's hard to have those standards and work in Los Angeles. And in film school, we were required to work on a lot of films, to be a PA on a lot of films, and they just weren't films I wanted to be associated with. So I had a really hard time making it work.
Okay, so when you were, quote, working on films, were you acting? Were you behind the scenes? Because a lot of people in the film industry will have ambitions of doing things in front of the screen, but then they work behind the scenes. So what did that look like for you?
A little bit of both. Like I said, I've been acting my whole life, and so I had some small roles on screen, but then in film school, it was more behind the scenes, learning all the lighting and the sound and all of that stuff. And being a PA is just a production assistant, so you're the grunt. You do whatever they tell you.
So you're the gopher, huh?
Yeah, basically.
So how long did you do that?
I went to film school for about 2 years out there. And then I got to a point, I'm a very spiritual person. And that plays a lot in my standards. I just got to a point where I just felt pulled in two different directions, either to my
Sure.
spirituality or to the world with the entertainment industry. And so I took it to the Lord in prayer. That's what I do with a lot of big major decisions in my life. And I felt the pull to move to Utah,
Okay.
which I was very resistant. It's not what I
Okay.
wanted to do. I wanted to stay in LA. I loved it out there, and I wanted to figure out how to make it work. But I did. I basically hopped in my car and moved to LA, or moved to Utah a few months later. Utah makes a lot of movies, and I
Yep.
was hopeful for more opportunities out here, as Utah tends to have a little bit of higher standards with the large Mormon population out here. And so I did. I came out here, and I was I was going to transfer to the same art school out here that I went to in LA. And I
Hmm.
had called ahead, had everything in place, and they're like, yeah, you'll be about 1/4 behind because we're a little bit newer. And I'm like, that's fine. That's like 3 or 4 classes, no big deal. And I get out here and only 3 credits transferred, and they were my AP scores from high school.
Oh my goodness.
Not one class transferred from the actual school to the other school, to the same school, just different cities. And then they gave me my schedule, and it was basically a graphic design degree is what they were having me do, even though they had a film program there, but they were having me taking like drawing and perspective. I'm like, that's not film. Like, I know where I'm
Yeah.
at in the film degree.
Right.
So that was super frustrating and devastating. I was like, I just moved 600 miles from home. I don't know what I'm doing, and this is not working out. So I ended up going to just a local school out here, Utah Valley University.
Hmm.
So I could keep going to school because I had loans, so I had to keep going.
Sure.
And the art school was super expensive and clearly not what I needed anymore with film. And so I just went to this UVU, and I said I'd go there for a semester to finish out the lease I had at
Yeah.
the apartment, and then I was going to go back home and figure out my life. And so I started there in the theater track, thinking that maybe I could transition a little bit over in that direction and maybe still do my passion, do my love of acting and directing, and maybe have a little bit more control over the standards. Um, and so I did that. It wasn't a great experience with the school, with the theater program, but I ended up meeting a guy out here at my church, and we dated for about 1.5 years and then got married. And I've been out here ever since, about 12 years. So, and I
Well,
eventually graduated in English because I was tired
English.
of dealing with the arts programs.
Did you get a degree so you could teach? I mean, a teaching certificate, or just finish in English?
No, I just finished, honestly, and I only got my associates because none of my credits transferred to that school either. And at that point, by the time I got my associates, I'd been going to school for 6.5 years. And I was like, I'm just done. This is not, I'm tired of school. It's not getting me anywhere. So I just
Yeah.
went over to English, which is a huge passion of mine, which has led to my current career of audiobook narration. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So, a lot of people don't know about UVU. I have a lot of connections to Utah, as we discussed
Mhm.
prior to coming on air, and it's a pretty good little school. I mean, a lot of kids that can't get into BYU because of their incredibly crazy admission
Yeah.
standards. I had a daughter that applied there 8 times,
Oh, wow.
and so. Yeah, it's a great alternative. You're still close to the same culture and
Mhm.
environment and stuff like that. So yeah, UVU is a good school. I mean,
Yeah.
the Wolverines are on the rise out there, so
Yes.
that's a
Yeah.
good school.
It was great. I didn't love the theater department and my advisor, but other than that, it was a good experience. It was a good
Yeah.
school.
So did you have an intention of what you were going to do with the English degree, or was it just, hey, I need to finish in something?
Yeah, it was just I need to get something and get out because school is not my thing, apparently.
Okay.
After 6.5 years and all these loans, I was like, I'm just done. I'm tired of it. And it wasn't too long after 2008 with the recession and everything, and so it's not like degrees didn't mean much at that
Yeah.
point anyway. And so it was just getting a degree and leaving, and then finding what I wanted to do. And I've hopped around for a few different jobs. I have a day job right now which I love, actually in internet marketing,
Oh, nice.
and that's a really fun
Yeah.
job, and it pays well, and it's a great environment. So
Yep.
it's wonderful. And then I get to do my acting in my spare time. So,
Yeah, I live in that space. That's what my other
oh,
business is.
wonderful.
So it's fantastic. So, it's interesting. I'll get on a little bit of a short tangent too. Y- You know, uh, the concept here in the country right now, they're talking about forgiving all these loans, and I'm not getting political and stuff, but it's insanity because, kids are signing up to get degrees that really don't have a whole lot of opportunity for something economic to pay it off.
Yeah.
And so I have this idea that I talk to everybody about that will listen. It's like, look, the government should score these degrees on your ability to pay them back.
Mm.
So if you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer or something that is a particular, they can allow you to loan all kinds of money.
Sure.
But if you're getting a degree in, political science or, liberal arts, any of these liberal arts degrees, it's
Right.
like they ought to restrict the amount of money that's they can loan, because so many people step out with a degree that basically is a piece of paper and isn't anything else.
Do anything. Yeah. It's an interesting problem we have in this country for sure.
Yeah. Well, and they don't even force a lot of these liberal arts degrees to get a teaching certificate, so at least
Right.
you could fall back on something.
Right.
I have a niece who got a degree in folk dance, and she can't get a job. I mean, it's
Right.
she doesn't have a teaching certificate, and she would be an amazing drama and music teacher. Just amazing, all kinds of talent. But 4 years in folk dance, and now what?
What do you do with it? Yeah, that's unfortunate.
So how did you get into doing the narration?
Yeah, so with my acting background, it was a pretty easy transition for me. And I'm an avid audiobook listener. I've been listening for years. My first book, it was actually when I first moved to Utah. I was resistant to audiobooks for the longest time because I'm a very visual learner.
Right.
And I just didn't think audiobooks would do anything for me. But I moved to Utah and there was a book club my roommate was putting on and I wanted to join so I can meet people.
Sure.
And the only copy they had was an audiobook. It was The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. And so I listened to it and I was hooked. It was so good. And I'm like, this is amazing. And from there, I started just consuming them like crazy. I loved listening. And so a couple years ago, I decided to take some classes that were voiceover specific to learn the voiceover side, because it's not something I had focused on much with film. And that kind of just opened the doors to audiobooks. I learned basically where to get your start and got some demos, did some auditions, and within there's a website out there called ACX, and it's where most narrators get their start, because it's indie authors posting their books for auditions.
Okay.
Versus publishers, which is kind of the top tier.
Right.
So I went on there, I posted a couple of files, I auditioned for 2 things, used those as my samples. And within about a week, I had an author approach me saying, I loved your samples. I really want you for my book. Will you audition? Yeah. And I read through it, and it's YA, young adult, which is my favorite genre. It's fantasies, there's unicorns and magic, and it was just so much fun. And I'm like, this is exactly the book I want to do. This is amazing. And it was a trilogy, and it was very well written. So I auditioned for it. She loved it. And the one thing getting into audiobooks, again, with my standards, like I had to email her point blank, and I said, I really want to do your book. I want to accept this contract. However, I have standards of that I won't do. And that includes language and sex scenes and those types of things. And so she gave me a list of any kind of language that was in there, and they were pretty mild. And there was only a couple of them, and it was to the point that I was okay with those. And there's no explicit sex scenes or anything like that. And so I accepted it, and it was such an amazing experience. I love those books. They're still probably my favorite ones I've ever done. I wish they weren't my first in some ways, because I've gotten so much better and I want to do them more justice, but I learned so much, and it was just an amazing experience. And that author loves me, and it was so great. They're such good books. The Shadows of Layla trilogy, if anyone's interested in them.
Okay.
Very good.
And I'm assuming that will be up on Amazon then?
Yep. Yes. Okay. Yep. On Audible and Amazon. Yep.
Okay. So where can people get a hold of you? I forgot to do this a little earlier. What's your website or social media links?
Yeah, my website is emmafayNarrates.com. And you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Emma Faye Actor.
Okay. And make sure we spell the last name so everybody gets it correct.
Yes, Faye, Faye. There's an E on there.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you.
All right. No problem. So what's the hardest part about doing an audiobook?
Oh, there's so many things. I mean, the fun part is getting in the booth and
Sure.
actually narrating it. But there's so much work. A lot of people don't realize how much work goes into an audiobook. And there's different people do it differently. You can either do the editing and the post-production yourself, or you hire out for that. And with
Okay.
my film background and having gone to film school and learning editing and whatnot, it's
Right.
something that I'm actually really good at myself. And
Okay.
so I do a lot of my post-production on my own, but that takes a long time. So
Yes.
basically, with any book, if you're a professional narrator, you're taking anywhere from 3 to 5 hours per finished hour of an audiobook.
Wow.
So if the book is 5 hours, that's anywhere from 15 to 25 hours if
Of
you know what
just
you're
editing,
doing.
just editing.
Well, that's the whole thing. That's
Okay.
from prepping all the way to mastering and uploading to distribution. And so you got to prep the book, which means you have to read the entire thing, kind of take notes of characters, take notes of words that you don't know how to pronounce, do some research. If there's any accents that you are not familiar with, you got to research those accents. Then you get in the booth and you record. But there's a lot of mistakes you make while you're recording. So it's a lot of stopping and starting again. And then your voice gets tired. So you can only do so many at one time. And then there's the editing, which takes a long time. That's the longest part of the whole process, is the editing, and got to get all the gross mouth sounds out that no one wants to hear.
Sure. So now, do you do all the characters in a book when you're doing these?
Yes, I do. Yeah, it's so much fun. And it's like I said, my acting background lend itself really well to it. So I can
Okay.
really slip into these characters easily and give a voice to them. And it's just, I mean, in the entertainment industry, we have something called the willing suspension of disbelief. And it
Okay.
just means that the reader or the listener or the viewer of the show or book or whatever is willing to suspend their belief, to know that that's not actually, like, I'm not actually a guy saying these
Sure.
words,
Sure.
but I'm portraying a guy or a
Right.
unicorn or whatever it is. And so as long as I can get the character nuance, then that's what it's all about. And of course I change my pitch and whatnot as needed per character. But it's hard not sometimes to not become a caricature either, because you don't want to like go super low to be a guy, because that's just not believable. And if you're a
Sure.
guy, you don't want to go super high for a girl. So there's a balance, and there's a lot of layering to the different voices, and sometimes it gets difficult. My very first book that I was talking about, there was 4 main characters. There's 2 girls and 2 guys, and the boys were twins, and they kind of
Oh
had
boy.
opposite character arcs. And so it was really hard to figure out ways to differentiate their voices enough, but keep them similar enough, being twins. So
Right.
sometimes that's a big challenge, is figuring out what they're going to sound like. But I let the story dictate it. As I'm reading and prepping, I start hearing their voices in my head, as I'm reading with the character descriptions, and then I just kind of let that come out, and that's who they are.
Wow. So do you ever go home feeling like you have multiple personalities?
Right? All the time. It's like I'm speaking the voices I hear in my head. So
Yeah, you're theater of the mind and multiple
Exactly.
personalities. Holy cow. I love that willing suspension of belief. I think there's a lot of people who operate their entire lives by that,
I would agree.
especially in today's political climate. There's a lot of people that are just willingly suspending common sense. And so, that's a great one. I might have to steal that and morph it to willing suspension of common sense. Geez Louise. So,
great.
when you do this, it's a really big time consumer.
Mhm.
How long does it take? Now, I know part of this question is going to be depends,
Sure.
but on a typical book, how long does it take you to finish up an entire book?
Yeah, again, so yes, it does depend. It depends on how long the book is.
Sure.
But for my books typically run between 4 to 8 hours is
Okay.
what the average has been on the
Sure.
ones that I've been booked on. I had a 13-hour one early on, which took a long time, especially being like my second book.
Wow.
It was slodged through that. But now if I don't have any other projects going on, I can get a 4 to 6 hour book done in about 3 weeks.
Wow.
But again, I have a full-time job, like I said, and so I work during the day, and I do the narration and the editing on the evenings and the weekends,
Sure.
or on lunch breaks or whatever. So
Whatever.
yeah, so that's my process. If you're working with publishers, sometimes they give you a week and you just record it, but you don't edit it yourself. You send it off, and they edit it and they proof it and all of that. And then that's the other part too, is you proof it to make sure it's word perfect. And then all the time you'll get a proofing packet back of all the mistakes you made.
Wow.
You correct as many as you can in the moment, but there's always words that you don't realize you said wrong.
So how do you find clean publishers? I mean,
Yeah.
so much standards have come down so long. I mean, I'm 55. I'm an old guy. Back when I grew up, finding content that wasn't raunchy or didn't have four-letter words was sort of the exception to the rule. Now finding something clean is kind of the exception to the rule.
It is. It's hard, and it's kind of heartbreaking at the same time, because it's something that means so much to me. It's not easy, especially when it's when I'm going to these websites and auditioning. It's always this balance of, this book looks interesting, and what I do is I go to the Amazon preview, or I'll get it on Kindle Unlimited, and so I can do a keyword search. Okay. And look for these words, like these buzzwords, words that I won't say, or words that might, have a connotation to explicit scenes. And so that I do that first and foremost. And if it looks clean enough, then I'll submit. And I always point to my website, or I make a note of it in my audition, that this is what I do. And if I can't find any of that information up front, and I'm still interested, I'll go ahead and audition, but I say that up front, like, hey, I only do clean reads. I don't do books with excessive language or explicit sexual content. And sometimes I write back and they're like, well, then you're not right for me. And I say, that's great. Good luck finding your narrator. Yeah. Cool. Thanks for letting me know. And other times they write back and they say, all I write is clean, so this sounds great. So.
Well, that's fantastic. Yeah. So when you've been doing this, do you do a lot of proactive, like, marketing, or is it just finding these websites and doing your own auditions for these?
It's a little bit of both. I'm really big on social media marketing. Instagram has a lot of authors on it, so that's been a really great place to meet authors. And I'm very clear on my branding. When you go to my website, I'm the Cleanreads queen. Like, I only do clean reads, and so it's very clear. Anytime I post books or anything, it's people know what I do. So that's helped a lot. So I do marketing with my website and social media, and then it's these audition websites and just word of mouth. Networking is the name of the game in just about any industry. And so I've had a lot of people who are like, oh, hey, clean reads, Emma does that, and I'll send them my way. So, well,
I work with a lot of authors, and the ones in fiction generally have more, I don't know if latitude's the right word, but width of commentary that could be, negative stuff in your mind or my mind. But then, I work with a lot that are nonfiction. So I would imagine nonfiction's a little easier of a genre to read for.
Yeah, it's easier, I think, to find books that you're comfortable with in nonfiction, because you can pretty much tell by the title if it's a subject matter that you're okay with doing. And I mean, there's always some that you never know for sure until you read it. But yeah, nonfiction is definitely a lot easier. I just finished my first nonfiction book, and it was a beautiful book about this woman. She was Jewish. She grew up Jewish and then found Christ and became a Jewish Christian. And it's her story of the valleys that you find yourself in life, and how Christ helps you through these valleys. So she's a valley girl, and it's a beautiful story, beautiful book. Great. That's Loved fantastic. It so much. So it's my first nonfiction, and it really opened my eyes to how much nonfiction, how fun that can be.
Well, I've got a ton of authors I'll send your way, because
wonderful.
There's just a lot of them are coaching and training and career advice and those types of things. And so, most people that are writing for those genres are not going to be, F-bombs all over the place, or, or trashy, romance novels with all kinds of questionable scenes and those types of things. Well, that's fantastic. So what's next? Are you chasing a particular project or two, or what's next on your horizon?
Yeah. So right now I'm completely booked.
Well, that's good.
It is great, and so it's been wonderful. I'm a bit swamped. It's a little overwhelmed, but it's a good blessing. Good problem to have. And so I'm booked out for the next couple of months on projects, and I'm excited for that. Something that I'm working on that's really near and dear to my heart is I am working on creating my own audiobooks production company
Nice.
to where I'm producing Cleanreads. So not just me narrating it, but having authors and narrators meet up and producing these books wide for more people. Because there's more than I can produce myself.
Oh, sure, sure.
And I want more out there. It's something that I'm very passionate about, of getting more Cleanreads out there, because there is a market for them. There are people that want them. It's
Yes.
just a matter of getting them to those people. So that's something I'm working on. It's on hold just a little bit with how many books I've got right now, because I'm trying to do it single-handedly, but it's a project I'm very passionate about. It's called Cat's Meow Productions.
Okay.
And it's completely for Cleanreads, for authors and narrators to come together and create these clean books for those who want it.
All right, so we have to give you a little airtime. What's the deal on the cats? How many cats do you have?
Yes, I have 4 cats. I am a cat mom.
4?
Crazy cat
4
lady.
cats?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, I'm afraid I might see you on KSL with 30 cats at your house or something.
Last year we only had 2, and I had one since I was 12 years old, and she was my baby. She was about 20 years old, and she finally passed on. And she just left a huge hole, and so we were going to get another one, and we ended up with 3 more.
Oh my goodness.
It took 3 cats to fill the place that she left. So yeah, we've got 4 spunky little rambunctious creatures, but they bring me a lot of joy. And so I was working with a fellow narrator friend with Cat's Meow, and trying to figure out how to make this work. And she's like, you just got to name it something you're passionate about, because
that's great.
That's what you love. And so I came up with Cat's Meow, and
well, Emma, you might be forever stained in my mind of the crazy cat lady. So
that's okay. Sure. I will take it.
Yeah, that's funny. My mom grew up on a ranch, and she tells stories of, she had a plethora of cats. My mom's just a cat person. One time she had 26 cats.
Wow.
So, I don't remember a time when she hasn't had a cat. Now, we never had cats we never had that many. I think the most we ever had was 2.
Oh, they're wonderful little creatures. I love it.
Do they hang out with you when you're recording?
No. So I have this wonderful booth here. And the outside of it is basically carpet. It's carpeted walls. Sure. And so my cats think that's a jungle gym for them, because they can climb carpeted walls. Yes. And so this is in the basement, in a room that they get locked upstairs. Yeah. When I'm in my booth. Otherwise, I'll just hear this scratching sound on the outside.
Well, fantastic. What an interesting occupation. And I'm really proud of you for, not that you care that I'm proud of you, but I think it's great that you're doing clean things.
I appreciate that.
We talked off air. I made the decision when I started. I have some big ambitions of being in a place for an interview show, but it's clean. Like I said off air, you have 2 choices of class. There's first and none. And I don't need to go in a place, because my stories are just as effective without F-bombs,
Yes.
And so
Totally
I think there is a growing trend for people that are like, you know what, I've had enough of this other stuff, And I like to be in a situation where anybody can listen to my podcast.
Yeah.
And, if you've got kids in the background, or, elderly people or whoever that don't want to hear that kind of stuff or don't need to hear it, it's just nice. And so it's great to have a peer in the industry that is doing clean things.
Yes, I totally agree. It's so refreshing to find others. And that's something I've always said, whether it was acting, film, or television, is I want whatever projects I do, my future kids or my parents, my mom, to be able to watch and enjoy. And she listens to all my audiobooks. And so I'm like, I never want to do anything that she couldn't listen to. I mean, but for myself as well, but for others. And it's been great. I have a lot of narrators who are interested in Cat's Meow being on the roster. And the one thing I get most often is, I want a book that my mom can listen to, because none of mine she can.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Well, thank you for coming on. You've been very gracious in telling your story, and then I think you're doing some interesting things. So I always have a last question before we depart. In the Western world, we have this concept called a bucket list. And in fact, I've had an opportunity to have on my show the bucket list guy. His name is Trav Bell, and check out episode number 60. He's a character, amazing guy. Well, anyway, and we all have these bucket list things we want to do before we depart this existence. And then But you have to remember there's always an opposite of everything in the universe. Okay. So there's a list of things we don't want to do. It rhymes with bucket and starts with an F, and I don't say that. Okay. So it's a list of things that, yeah, hey, I'm not doing that. So
Yeah.
I want to find out from you an item or two that might be on your effort list. Now, I'll share a couple
Okay.
just to put some ideas. I will never, ever, ever again do a Lakota Sioux sweat lodge. The concept of excessive heat, excessive humidity, excessive drumming, and excessive chanting. Not doing that again. And I'm not doing sardines. I'm sorry, I don't want to. I want to eat something that looks like it's going to swim at me. So, what might be an item or two that would be on Emma's effort list?
Oh, I love it. So, well, I'm a vegetarian for one, so I won't ever eat meat for one. But I have a really irrational fear of sharks and the ocean.
Okay.
And so everybody has told me my whole life that I just need to face those fears and go swimming with sharks in like those cages. And I'm like, that is something I will never, ever, ever do.
I'm with you on that one. Nope, sorry. Something that's bigger than me and wants to eat me, no thank you.
And I can't even be in water, like really. And so I'm like, no, that's just horrible in so many ways.
Well, that tells us a little bit about you. So thanks for sharing.
Maybe I'm a cat reincarnated. I don't like water.
Okay, yeah.
If I believed in that, maybe I was a cat.
You come back as a cat. Okay, so well, it's been great to have you this morning.
It was.
And
Thank you.
Look forward to sending people your way. And one
Appreciate
more
it.
time, if you could, throw out those websites so people can find you.
Yes, Emma Faye narrates.com. That's Faye, Faye. And my Insta and Facebook handles are at Emma Faye Actor.
Fantastic.
Look forward to hearing
right.
from you.
Well, that'll call it another episode on the Rex Andrews Show. Please don't forget to stop by the show website, rexandrewsshow.com. Again, we just scratched the surface today telling Emma's story. And so go there and check out her profile. You can also check out all the profiles of all of our guests. They're there, and then our upcoming guests. So there's always a plethora of people that we interview and find that are doing great things. So until next time, folks, I will say the three things I say at the end of every podcast. Be safe, but be bold, and make it a great day.